With the World Cup a little under a month away, the citizens of Brazil are feeling the pinch as rental prices skyrocket in the run-up to the games. In Sao Paulo, locals have moved in to an empty lot near the $445 million gleaming new football stadium there, settling in with plastic tents and calling the site the People's Cup. The protest settlement has drawn thousands and prompted a visit by Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff to address the issue. I was joined earlier by freelance journalist Ben Taverner. I first asked him what the people in the tents want exactly from the government.
Yeah, it might be 4 kilometers from the stadium, but when I went to the camp last week, in their minds, they may as well be camping right outside the front door, because they feel that the World Cup and the speculation that's come along with that has just driven up prices to such an extent in the surrounding 4 neighborhoods that they just can't afford to live in apartments around there anymore, because rents aren't that expensive in the east part of the city. It's not the center. It's not exactly one of the most glamorous parts of the city, but now they've got, as you say, a many million dollar stadium right next door to it. The prices have gone up. Some people say their rent has actually trebled, and that's meant that some 2,500 families have now made their way to this occupation encampment some 4 kilometers away from the stadium. But the stadium is within view of the camp, and they are reminded every moment of the day that they are there because of the World Cup. What they want from the government is help, basically. They don't want free houses, they told me. They said that they want to be able to pay at least something towards new apartments. They don't mind where it is. It can be on that plot of land or it can be somewhere else. But what they'd like is the government to stump up some money and help them with subsidized housing.
Now, this protest referred to as the People's Cup, it's grown, and there's a lot of protests going on over the entire nation about issues related to these sorts of things. President Rousseff is supposed to be dropping by tomorrow. What are people expecting her to do?
Well, she's been fairly willing in the past to engage with people, including the homeless workers movement there at the encampment. That she met with the leader last week, and that suspended to some extent some of the protests. But another week has now gone by, and tomorrow we're expecting at least 6 simultaneous protests in Sao Paulo, as many as 50 across the country, and perhaps another 15 around the world, including places like Germany. So they're very much hoping that she will re-engage with the movement. She has said, and she's stressed, that the government has got housing programs up and running. She said that just in Sao Paulo, 130,000 people are registered on housing programs. But of course, there's no magic wand, and these people are going to have to register and wait their turn. She's been fairly forceful, but at the same time, she has tried to meet them somewhere near the middle.
Now, protests, as you've said, are going to be taking place across the country tomorrow, but people have taken to the streets of Brazil numerous times in recent months about this. Do you think that the World Cup is offering them the sort of world stage to air their grievances on this? Or if they didn't have this sort of world stage, would these protests really be going on?
Well, Brazil is a country that likes to protest. There are protests happening here every day, and not just protests. We have a lot of strikes going on. Teachers are on strike today. We saw 5,000 to 7,000 teachers out in the middle of Sao Paulo yesterday. Rio has been paralyzed for a second day today. And of course, the reason that they're happening now is because they have this leverage, which is given by the fact that the World Cup is here, starting in under 30 days. And of course, the glare of the world media is here. They've got a stage. But I do think they will be out in protest anyway. But of course, it probably drives more people onto the street, knowing that the media is there. But having said that, we're not seeing the kind of protests we saw last year during the Confederation Cup, in June 2013 last year, when we saw up to 1 million people in over 300 cities across Brazil. We're not talking about that. The last protest in Sao Paulo, for example, which was dedicated as an anti-World Cup protest, saw only around sort of 800, 1,000 people. There's a hardcore group of people that still want protests, and I'm sure the numbers could grow as we head towards the World Cup, but we're just not sure what's going to happen.
Is it, for argument's sake, is it fair to blame the World Cup? Or is this more of a Brazilian government problem that was there long before FIFA granted the World Cup to the country?
It's probably a question to address to the Brazilians, but they are undoubtedly blaming the government more than FIFA. FIFA becomes the target when it turns around and criticizes Brazil, when it turns around and says, look, you're not doing well enough, because the Brazilians are very well aware of how much money is going into this, whether it's in the form of government money as loans, or some people think that the money is just going to go and be forgotten about. When FIFA, of course, granted Brazil the World Cup, the country was edging its way towards an economic boom. In 2010, the country saw GDP growth of 7.5%. So it was a different time then. But the government here now has a fairly difficult task ahead, because a lot of these protests aren't just leveled at FIFA. As I say, most of them are leveled at the president, Dilma Rousseff, at her party, PT, and at the government at large. And as I say, they've got this tightrope to walk now, because they've got general elections coming up in October. And we still have to see whether they're going to even try and use the World Cup in any kind of way.
Well, especially with the accusations of corruption, mismanaged money and things like that. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, especially with those elections coming up. Thank you very much for joining me, freelance journalist Ben Taverner.